With its prevalence in the time period, it's no surprise that Jane Austen's novels have it present near constantly. They were all pressed to go into the house and take some refreshment. It would be topical today to discuss tea. Hello fellow Janeites, I thought it would be topical today to discuss tea. I have a part 2 coming where I talk about some of the interesting things I learned about with tea, like counterfeit tea and smuggling. But for this video, I'm keeping it to just what is most relevant to Austen's novels. There were 3 main times throughout the day in which tea was consumed: breakfast, in the late afternoon, early afternoon time, during visiting hours, and after dinner. I will be going over them in that order. Tea, or coffee, were the morning pick-me-ups of the Regency era. But due to preference, fashion, and supply chain stuff with the Napoleonic Wars, on average, tea was the most popular choice. What time breakfast would have happened varies a good bit depending on social class and location. Lighting, particularly good lighting, was expensive, as is illustrated by Mrs. Elton from Emma's exclamations over the expense a family is willing to go to for a governess. Wax candles in the schoolroom. You may imagine how desirable. Because light was so expensive, having later hours and thus using up more candles became a mark of the rich and fashionable. This is how Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice is able to receive a note from Jane right after breakfast, walk 3 miles, and still interrupt the Netherfield party with their breakfast tea hot in their cups. The Bingleys, being both from London and desirous of being fashionable, keep later hours than the Bennets, whose once brewed tea has already been passed down to the servants for a second steeping by the time the Netherfield servants have probably even started getting together the tea things for their family's breakfast. The formalization of tea as a meal was yet to take place in the Regency era. However, with most breakfasts wrapping up by 10, and the next meal, dinner, being as late as 6 or 6:30 for the fashionable set, taking tea and some refreshments in the middle of the day was common practice. The other thing that happened in the middle of the day in Regency era, and so could coincide with tea, was morning calls. In Regency England, morning referred to any time in between breakfast and dinner. But to avoid differing meal schedules from causing hurt feelings, the typical period for visiting was in between 12 and 3. Since visiting hours happened in the afternoon, and having a spot of tea in the afternoon also happened in the afternoon, the two things could overlap. If the hosts were already consuming some refreshment when guests are shown in, they are required by politeness to offer them some as well. If the hosts are not having tea at the moment when guests are shown in, they can offer to call for some, at which point the guest can either accept or decline. Since waiting for the tea things to arrive and then drinking the tea takes time, whether the parties will accept or decline or offer to send for tea or not depends largely on how much time they can and want to visit. This is likely the reason why Mr. Darcy, on finding Elizabeth and the Gardiners touring Pemberley, repeatedly presses them to come inside for some refreshment. As Austen says, they were all pressed to go into the house and take some refreshment. But this was declined, and they parted on each side with the utmost politeness. At the end of the day, Darcy wants Elizabeth to stay there longer, which is so cute. The third time in the day when it was customary to drink tea was a few hours after dinner, leaving plenty of time for a leisurely meal and some after-dinner conversation. Dinner guests would be expected to stay for this after-dinner tea typically. Hosts could also invite people only to the after-dinner tea. This could be independent of a dinner party. For example, in Pride and Prejudice, when Lady Catherine invites the Hunsford Parsonage party to come over for tea, they were merely asked on leaving church to come there in the evening. Or it could be attached to a dinner party, like the Coles dinner party in Emma, when Jane Fairfax and some of the other less worthy females were to come in the evening. An invitation to tea after dinner was perfectly polite, but as you can probably tell from the language, was not considered as good as a dinner invitation, and it carried the slight classist sting that the party invited was not considered worthy of entry to the dining room, while still requiring them to decline any other dinner invitations that they receive. So, tea after dinner was good, but both was better. Tea was no joking matter in Regency England, with it appearing multiple times throughout the day and characterizing many social interactions, and even being the center of some of its own intrigue and scandal with counterfeit and smuggling. With its prevalence in the time period, it's no surprise that Jane Austen's novels have it present near constantly. And when it is absent, it is cuttingly pointed in that absence, like with the Bingley sisters not giving Jane tea when she visits them in London. I have a part 2 coming where I discuss some of the fun things about tea and interesting facts that don't directly relate to Jane Austen's novels, but do help to make up the context of the tea-drinking world in which Jane Austen's characters lived. If you're still watching at this point, be sure to let me know when you like to drink tea. For me personally, it's a comfort food. And until next time, run mad as often as you choose, but do not faint.